we have a whole range of interagency meetings, deputies committee meetings, principals committee meetings, the latter of which chaired by the National Security Advisor, and then National Security Council meetings, which the President himself chairs. Every one of those requires intelligence. The national security apparatus is driven by intelligence. So across the board, I think intelligence pervades the national security apparatus and its decision-making processes.
We're going to go first to Eli Lake of Bloomberg, Aaron Kelly of USA Today, Ellen Nakashima of The Post, Kristen Donnelly of NBC, Chuck Ross of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Mark Thompson of Time, Dustin Volz of Reuters, and John Gizzi of Newsmax. Eli, where are you?
Yes, thank you very much. Director, talk a little bit about the case of Lieutenant Commander Edward Lind. How bad, I know the damage assessment hasn't been done, but how bad is the breach been, and how would it compare to some other recent crime cases that are named?
Well, clearly, this is an ongoing, now it's entered into military litigation, so I probably shouldn't, it's going to be handled in accordance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so I probably shouldn't comment specifically. Any espionage case, particularly when it reaches the point of a prosecution, is by definition serious.
We're going to Aaron Kelly of USA Today.
I wanted to ask you about conscription. Is the administration going to come out in support of the Feinstein-Burr bill to compel companies to comply with court orders?
I really can't answer that. I think, the issue with encryption, I would refer to what the President said about it, and that is, people taking absolutist positions on it. It's not helpful on either side. I think we have, in the intelligence community, I have been, as has Director Comey of the FBI and Admiral Rogers, Director of NSA, have been, I think, pretty consistent in our support of strong encryption. Somehow we need to find a balance here, and I'm not an IT expert. I don't know the technicalities of how we might arrive there, but that has been the characteristic of this country, is a way of finding, to thread the needle here so that we ensure privacy and security, particularly on an individual basis, as well as security in the context of what's best for the collective good. And that is right now kind of an elusive holy grail that we're still pursuing, I would hope. And so I'm not going to take, on behalf of the administration, I'm not going to take a position on legislation or anything like that. I just would refer to what the President said about neither camp assuming absolutist positions.
Ellen Nakashima from The Post.
More questions on this issue. Former CIA Director.
A little louder, Ellen. I'm sorry.
Former CIA Director Mike Hayden has said that encryption is really more of an issue for the law enforcement community, not the intelligence community. So, in your opinion, how much of a challenge is?
That's not a last issue.
I cannot hear it.
How much of a challenge is end-to-end encryption for the intelligence community, in particular the NSA and CIA? And did the intelligence community actually try to find vulnerabilities that would help the FBI crack that includes iPhone?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the latter point about, I'll leave that to the FBI. But I will tell you that as a result of the Snowden revelations, that the onset of commercial encryption was accelerated by about 7 years. And it has had and is having, profound effect on our ability to collect, particularly against terrorists. ISIL is the most sophisticated, by far, user of the internet, and the technologies that are available privately to ensure end-to-end encryption. And so that is a major inhibitor to discerning plotting going on principally by ISIL or others. And so with the growing availability of apps that provide unbreakable encryption, this is obviously a challenge for us.
We're going to go to Kristen Donnelly from NBC. Hi, Kristen. There you are, back in the cheap seats. I apologize.
Can you talk a little bit about the 28 pages? Obviously, these are classified. However, Bob Ransom has it could be several weeks, maybe a month, before the these could be classified. And can you talk about the process that's going on right now, and decide how much longer that it might take? Can you talk a little bit about the speculation that there is some tie from the Saudi government and government-sponsored charities and 9/11?
Well, thanks for the question, as you like to say on the Hill.
How's the view from under the bus, as you like to say?
We are, I didn't wear my Jiffy Lube cap underneath the bus. Anyway, we are in a position of trying to coordinate interagency position on the declassification of the 28 pages. And Senator Graham mentioned on, I think it was Meet the Press yesterday, that the White House has told him we'd have, we hope to have this action completed by June, and I think that is certainly a realistic goal. And I'd probably just let it stand at that.
Chuck Rosh from St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Director, thank you for doing this. As you know, the NGA just recently announced St. Louis as the site for its new facility there. There's something of a cross-border war going on now between the delegations there, and the Illinois delegation is arguing it made more sense from an intelligence purpose and from a security purpose to locate it across the river near an Air Force base there. Can you tell us why it's tentatively going to be in St. Louis, the decision behind that, and what's taken into account now when these new facilities are built in this new age of threat for terrorism?
Well, first of all, the current setup at 2nd Street, if you're familiar with it, is, has that building, that facility there has one of the lowest facility condition indexes of any such facility in the intelligence community. It's very old. The building there, they're historically preserved, go back to the 40s. It has inadequate electrical system, plumbing. It's next door to a chemical plant. There's a railroad track behind it that we have no insight into what's in the rolling stock, and it's in a floodplain. Other than that, it's, good facility. Now, NGA, to its credit, and I certainly did during the almost 5 years I was NGA director, we did all we could to sustain the building, the facilities, and certainly the quality of life for the employees there. So it needs a new facility. Robert Cardillo is the director of NGA, and is his recommendation, because this process is not finished yet, his recommendation that be located in a site, another site in St. Louis. Obviously, he knew from the get-go that one delegation or the other was going to be unhappy about this decision-making process. So since it's not over yet, I'm not going to prejudice that one way or the other. I'll just simply say I have no basis for countermanding Robert's decision.
We're going to Mark Thompson of Time Magazine.
Yes, sir. Given your extensive background from a Marine rifleman to a Lieutenant General in the Air Force to the head of DIA and now as the Director of National Intelligence, I know you don't wade into political matters, but given your extensive military and intelligence background, I'm wondering if you can tell us how important it is that there be a steady hand on the ship of state.
You mean the intelligence ship of state?
No,
I think it's important.
There's probably been a lot of parties in the last several months, and if those people are anything like the ones I've been at parties with, they all want to know about some of these candidates and what's going to happen to the United States. They're nervous. They're concerned. So how does that affect your job? How relevant is it? Or doesn't it make any difference at all?
Well, it doesn't make, personally doesn't make a lot of difference to me because I'm out of here on the 20th of January 2017. Certainly you worry about rhetoric on the campaign trail. I think the history has been that once a president is inaugurated and is in office and realizes the burden and the responsibilities of the position, I think that has a tempering effect on anyone. And I think it will here, regardless of who's elected. The only other comment I would make, I am struck with how simple things are on the campaign trail and how those very same issues are very hard in the confines of the Situation Room.
Can you give us an example?
Just about any example you want to name, there are far more complexities, policy implications, legal implications to things than would appear on the campaign trail. I'm not going to cite any specific example at risk of finger pointing at one candidate or another.
Let me give you a sense of where we're going next, because I know a lot of people are waiting. We're going to go to Dustin Volz, John Gizzi, Charlie Spearing, Anna Mulrine, Patrick Tucker, Eric Schmidt, Ryan Brown, Julian Hatton, Doyle McManus, Robert Schlesinger, and Tim Johnson. Mr. Volz.
This is a subtlety, I know,
You're doing
to
fine.
be very short.
No,
I got it.
This is just a test of how, as an old man, I can remember names. So,
Yeah, you got two old guys up here, so
That's
be
right.
careful. Yeah.
Mr. Volz.
Thank you, Director Clapper. 14 lawmakers in the House of Representatives sent a letter to your office last week, to you and your office, for a public estimate of the number of U.S. persons caught up in Section 702 surveillance under the FISA Amendments Act. Some other groups have asked for this before, but these lawmakers said that they believe this is possible and that they're okay with a one-time privacy concern that would arise from such an estimate. Do you plan, a two-part question, is it possible for you to give an estimate to them, and do you plan to do so publicly before the law is up for renewal in 2017?
Well, first, I just have to say how important Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is to the nation's safety and security. It is this tool is a prolific producer of critical intelligence for this country and our friends and allies. So that's point one. Point two is, if we could have made such an estimate, and if such an estimate were easy to do and explainable without compromise, we'd have done it a long time ago. So we're looking at several options right now, none of which are optimum. They all have drawbacks. The irony is, as we've pointed out many times, is that to actually render an accurate number, we actually have to be more invasive and identify more U.S. persons in order to come up with an accurate number. That many people find that unsatisfactory, but that's a fact. So we are looking at this. We were before I got the letter, or I read about it in the media. I read about it in the media before I received it. And we're going to do our best. But any methodology we come up with will not be completely satisfactory to all parties.
Mr. Gizzi, Newsmax.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Director, for doing this. Question is this: is there any evidence that ISIS or Al-Qaeda are planning any actions in the coming months that would influence the U.S. elections? And do they have, are they encouraged in any way by Trump as a candidate?
I cannot point to any evidence that would indicate a preference on the part of ISIS to who was elected in our presidential election. And whether or not they might do something that could have a bearing on it, well, they could. particularly if they do something in this country. That would obviously probably have some impact. It's kind of an imponderable, but that certainly could influence how people vote in the election.
Charlie Spearing from Pride Park.
Earlier this month, President discussed the privacy demands of Americans online versus security expectations, saying that it had a contradictory demand on government. And my question was, when it comes to that philosophy, what expectations should Americans have for online privacy to receive proper security?
Well, I think they should have great assurance, despite the hyperbole in the media, because of the many safeguards, oversight by all three branches of the government, aggressive oversight by all three branches of the government, that we are going to be as precise as we possibly can be in exploiting the internet for foreign intelligence purposes. I often long for the halcyon days of the Cold War, where we had two essentially mutually exclusive telecommunication systems, so that if we collected against the one dominated by the Soviet Union, there was almost assurance that we were not going to collect information on U.S. persons. With the advent of the internet, everything is interconnected, and so all those billions of innocent transactions by millions and millions of innocent people are all mixed up with nefarious activities by nefarious people. And so the challenge for us is picking out the needles from the haystack, not just one haystack, but hundreds and thousands of haystacks, without in any way jeopardizing the civil liberties of privacy of Americans. And believe me, we go to and have gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that those rights aren't infringed upon. And by the way, all of us are American citizens, and I certainly care about, as do everyone else in the intelligence community, of our own privacy and civil liberties as well.
Anna Mulrine from The Monitor.
Mr. Director, you've spoken about the dangers of cyber attacks and the need for cybersecurity, but yet on the law enforcement side, there's a vociferous response to the idea of unbreakable encryption. So you said you're not an IT person, but I mean, how do you square that? What sorts of questions do you ask yourself when it comes to how do you make the decisions about unbreakable encryption versus digital attacks?
I would hope. I place great faith and confidence in the tremendous technological ingenuity and creativity that we have in this country. And this is one case where there needs to be a partnership between industry, the commercial sector, and the government. I don't know what the answer is. I would hope that the companies would devote some serious effort in terms of research, development, some other alternative methods by which we can continue to safeguard the security, private security of people, as well as ensuring the public security of this country.
Do you think there are circumstances under which we need unbreakable encryption?
I'm sorry?
Do you think there are circumstances under which we need unbreakable encryption?
Well, you mean it's impossible to break, and it's ensuring thus that the terrorists get a pass. Is that what you're asking?
You probably know more about the definitions than I do of unbreakable encryption.
Well, in the history of mankind, since we've been doing signal intelligence, ultimately there's really no such thing, given proper time, proper application, and the application technology. So again, I think your question gets back to what, and I'll just answer it and repeat what the President said about people assuming absolutist positions, which is not helpful.
We're going to go next to Patrick Tucker from Defense One.
That's me.
That's you.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, Director. Earlier this year, North Korea staged an underground nuclear bomb test. They claimed that the test was for a hydrogen bomb. The seismic activity suggests that it was probably not a hydrogen bomb. Some people have suggested, though, that it might have been a so-called boosted bomb, a bomb that has some characteristics that are similar to a hydrogen bomb, but not as large in magnitude, and that would suggest a improvement in the capabilities of North Korea to create a hydrogen bomb. Can you tell us today, do you feel that North Korea is on the road to creating a hydrogen bomb in the next 5 years?
I can't say that. I will say that aspirationally, the current regime in North Korea, which is one guy, is very determined to portray to the world that North Korea is in fact a nuclear power, and he wants recognition of that. And so, despite some of the failures that they've recently incurred, they will, in my view, continue to press on to develop nuclear capabilities, which I think probably ultimately, aspirationally, would include a hydrogen capability. But I certainly can't ascribe a timeline to that.
Eric Schmidt from the New York Times.
Hi, Dorothy. It's been a month now since the attacks in Brussels. What has the intelligence community learned since then, or do you have a better understanding about how the Islamic State operates? And do you believe that they have clandestine cells like they had in Brussels and places like Germany, England, and Italy?
Yes, they do. And that is a concern of obviously ours and our European allies. And I assure you, we're doing all we can to share with them. I was recently in Europe, and as part of a U.S. delegation that met with a number of nations there to try to promote more sharing between and among the nations in Europe. And that right now is our greatest, is a major source of a major emphasis of ours, is to promote more sharing and to do all we can to share with them, because we continue to see evidence of plotting on the part of ISIL in the countries you name.
What have you learned about Islamic State in the aftermath of the Brussels attack?
Well, we've learned that they are fanatic, very OPSEC conscious, meaning Operation Security conscious. They're very mindful of that. They have taken advantage, to some extent, of the migrant crisis in Europe. It's something which the nations, I think, have a growing awareness of.
We're going to go to Ryan Brown of CNN.
Thank you for doing this. Going back to the North Korea issue, I know you talked a little bit about their hydrogen bomb and wanting to get that nuclear power status.
Well, I wouldn't state that as though that were a fact, a hydrogen bomb. So,
right. No, but in terms of developing these capabilities, but in terms of their ballistic missile development, what is your threat assessment of ballistic missiles? There was reports of a successful submersible missile test recently. What is your assessment of the threat that poses to the United States, both in the region and wider?
well, we might disagree with the North Korean claims of a success. We're still wringing that out with technical assessments of the extent to which that their SLBM worked or not. We have to assume the worst. That's traditionally what we do in the intelligence community. So we ascribe a capability for them to have fielded an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now we have low confidence in that because they've never successfully tested one. So that has a bearing on the assessment. But I think overall we have to assume the worst. And when you think about it, the North Koreans, in a sense, have achieved an objective there because they have created at least the psychology of deterrence, which is what they're very interested in. My brief sojourn there, November 14, when I engaged with them, was they are clearly in siege mentality mode, and they think that we are bent on regime change and on absorbing the DPRK. So they want the recognition as a nuclear power, and they want the nuclear capability as that they view fundamentally as their ticket to survival.
Julian Haddam from The Hill.
Thank you very much, sir. A question about there's a lawsuit that was allowed to proceed last week concerning a pair of CIA contractors in Spokane, Washington, brought by the ACLU in support in regards to their work in the EIT program the CIA conducted under former President George W. Bush. I'm wondering if you have any concern about the implications of allowing a lawsuit like that to go forward, if you're worried that that hinders in any way outside contractors' ability to work with the IC.
Can you say a little bit louder?
It's
You're talking about the lawsuit in Washington?
In Washington, yeah.
Against the two contractors?
Yes.
And the question is?
If there's any concern that that lawsuit, if it is allowed to go forward and continues to go forward, will discourage cooperation from contractors with the IC in the future?
Well, I don't know. I'm reluctant to comment on an ongoing matter of litigation. So I really can't and shouldn't say anything about it. The likelihood that we're going to engage in hire contractors to do extraordinary interrogation techniques, I think, is about slim and none. So from that standpoint, maybe not, but I can't really speak to the total and final legal implications of that case are.
We're going to Doyle McManus from the LA Times.
Thank you, Mr. Director. A question about Syria. As you know, the President announced today that he has approved the deployment of 250 additional special operations troops on the ground in Syria. This comes after several years in which the assessment of most of the intelligence community was that the Arab opposition forces in Syria really had very little capability in terms of organization, military impact, staying power, anything you want. Has that assessment changed? And is it possible yet to set out any plausible timelines if their capability increases, if pressure on ISIS continues?
Well, the answer to the last question is no. I certainly can't project. Realistically, I can't project timelines. I do think that the deployment of the, as announced, the Special Forces additional troops is a manifestation of the need to and the effectiveness of advising, assisting, and being on the ground with not just the Arabs, but the others who are there, principally various factions of the Kurds. And so the complexity of the situation in Syria is unbelievable. And to the extent that we can promote proxies who have interest in their own villages, their own towns, their own communities, and as well, from my standpoint, to gain more on-the-ground insight is a good thing. But I cannot project, what's going to be the incremental impact of these additional 250 and how long it will take before there is some sort of resolution of the situation. I can't say that.
We're going to go next to Robert Schlesinger from U.S. No, we're not going to go to Robert Schlesinger. Sometimes I'm looking too hard. We're going to go to Tim Johnson from McClatchy.
Hi, Mr. Director. I'd like to refer to the Panama Papers that came out earlier this month. There was a rather immediate reaction from established democracies, Iceland, Britain, in terms of shaking up the political status quo, but not so in Russia, Pakistan, China. Do you think this is going to blow over? Is there some longer-term impact from knowledge of offshore wealth held by leaders?
Well, I can't It's hard to make a generalized response to that. I think it will depend very much on individual cases. One of the reasons it hasn't evoked a lot of reaction in Russia, it's kind of obvious, is a little tighter control on your counterparts there. So the likelihood that that's going to come close to or touch President Putin, I think, is pretty remote. Other places, it depends on, frankly, the politics and how individual countries, how individual legal systems respond to it. So it's hard to make a generalized answer to your question.
Paul Schinkman from U.S. News.
Yes, Mr. Director, just to follow up on the question about the new deployment of troops to Syria, you sort of mentioned this, but just to get it clearly, can you say definitively what 250 or what 300 soldiers can do that 50 soldiers cannot?
No, I can't. It's not an intelligence issue, and I always, as I like to remind my friends on the Hill, that I'm just down the engine room shoveling intelligence coal, and people on the bridge drive the ship, decide how fast they'll go, and arrange the furniture on the decks. So I really can't say.
So a serious part of their task is to gather intelligence, and you had talked about how now they're going to be able to diffuse to different groups. If this is a good thing, ramping up the number of Americans, can we assume that there will be more deployments in the coming months?
No, I can't. I wouldn't go there either. And insight, on the ground insight, intelligence gathering is but one of, and it's an ancillary task that they do. So obviously, I'm happy that anytime you get ears and eyes on the ground, that's a good thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that arithmetically we put more people, that would improve. I wouldn't want to say that. Can't say what impact it'll have, or does that indicate more? I can't go there.
We're going to go next to Shane Harris from the Daily Beast.
In the past, the nominees from each party for president have received security briefings in the run-up to the general election. Is that still the plan with whoever the Democratic and Republican nominees are? And what steps will you take to ensure that they're not mishandling any classified information they receive?
That is exactly the process that's gone on for many, many years, and we have already established a plan for a briefing both candidates when they are named, and then certainly after November when the president-elect is known, then it gets more intensive. And we've already got a team set up to do that, and a designated lead who is not a political appointee, and all of us that are currently involved will not be involved in that, other than to oversee it, to ensure that everybody gets the same information, and that we do comply with the needs to protect sources and methods and comply with security rules.
And will they have to come to a SCIF to get it? How will they get that?
We normally arrange those depending on the candidate schedules and where they are, and we normally will accommodate their needs through a local secure facility.
We're going to go next to Alexis Simondinger from Real Clear Politics. Alexis, down the end of the table.
Director, I wanted to follow up on your answer about what you've learned since the Europe attacks. You were talking about your conviction that there are other cells in Europe. Can you expand on that and describe two things? One is how much have we learned about the threat of additional attacks, and then also, if you're making such an effort to promote information sharing, can you expand on what the impediments are and how much time it may take for the information sharing to reach a level that you think would be optimal?
Yeah, the challenge we have, with plots, is that in many cases we are only seeing a snapshot or an anecdotal stream. We don't have the total picture all the time, and if we did, then the plot would easily be thwarted. Because of particularly ISIL's mindfulness of the efforts mounted to monitor them, they are very, very security conscious. They're more and more going to the use of encrypted applications, and so it makes it all the tougher. The obstacles in Europe have, I think, somewhat to do with some of the sort of fundamental conflict between, on the one hand, the European Union incentives and drives to promote openness of and free movement of people and goods, privacy, which is in some ways in conflict with the responsibilities that each country has as a nation state to protect the security of its borders and its people. And so those are sort of countervailing processes. Each of these countries have their own laws, their own, particularly with respect to privacy and sharing information between their intelligence and law enforcement entities. Something that we've worked pretty hard in this country since 9/11.
But is it realistic to expect that sharing to happen?
I think it is. I think it was very significant when the European Parliament, after some 4.5 years of deliberation, did pass a law that at least authorizes member nations to take 2 years to figure out how to better coordinate selected airline passenger data. But that's fairly limited. So how long this will take, I don't know. I will tell you, I was in Paris, coincidentally 2 days after the attack on November 13th, and then of course after that, followed by the Brussels attack, and I think there is growing public awareness when these attacks happen that something needs to be done. Certainly with our counterpart organizations, the intelligence and security organizations, there is a greatly heightened awareness of the need to share.
We're going to go next to Howard LaFranchi from the Monitor. Howard.
Thanks, sir. About Syria, for a long time, another reason that we haven't gotten involved in Syria was concern about the intertwining of extremists, Islamist groups, in particular Al-Qaeda, Jamaat and the other opposition groups. And I'm wondering if this larger number of advisors, special ops forces suggests that A, we're getting a better hold on how to separate them out, or if it just means we're going to work more with the Kurds.
Well, where the advisors are not going to be in the vast bulk of Syria. Obviously, there's sort of two zones, if you will, in Syria. There's the western spine, sort of going from the south, south of Damascus and north to Aleppo, and then you've got the extreme east. And the phenomenon we're dealing with is the term of art now that's used as marbling, where you have these groups, and there are hundreds of them. At one point, we estimated 1,500 or 1,600 of these various separate groups of varying stripes of ideology and commitment. And on the battlefield, there have been tactical marriages of convenience, particularly with Al-Nusra Front, which is a very capable fighting force. And so we are doing what we can to influence the separation of these, but it's very difficult when many of these groups are focused on their own local area, their own village, their own town, their own community in a large city. And so inducing them to separate because it works better for us is a real challenge.
We're going to go next to Natal Tusi from Politico.
Sir, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the spread of ISIS in South Asia and how real that is. In particular, we're hearing reports that Bangladesh has increasing issues with this. And also, I was wondering, in countries like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan in particular, how cooperative are the governments in recognizing whether or not this is a problem and cooperating with the United States on it?
Well, it's a very good question, and that is a concern because of the nascent provinces, to use the ISIL term, that appear to be forming in some countries in Southeast Asia. And I'll just say, without diming out any one of them or singling out anyone, is that there are varying degrees of recognition of the problem, and we'll do what we can to share, to enlighten, to educate, at least from our standpoint, what's happening in each of these countries.
Is there anybody who hasn't had one before we go to a second round? Yes, sir. Brian from the LA Times.
Director, I wanted to ask about
Should have said Brian Bennett from the LA Times. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
I want to ask about MANPADS in Syria. Have you seen any indications that man-portable surface air missiles are currently used by any side in Syria? And what kind of threat that poses?
Well, there certainly have been against the regime.
Where did those come from?
I'm sorry?
Where was the origin of those?
Well, there are places awash in MANPADS. The regime had them. The active procurement networks, black market, whatever. So there's all kinds of sources for the proliferation of MANPADS in Syria.
Do those threat to civilian aviation in the region? Do they pose a threat to civilian aviation in the region?
To civilian aviation? Well, certainly. Hopefully there's not too many civilian airliners transiting Syria. If I were board an airplane, I don't think I'd found out it was flying over Syria. I think I'd skip it.
And one other follow-up on that. Can you assess the possibilities of new technologies that would have a security feature on man-portable surface air missiles and the possibility of that?
Well, MANPADS or shoulder-fired or either individual or crew-served surface-to-air missiles. This has been historically a cat-and-mouse thing, an action-reaction where, you field one and then you develop countermeasures, and then they field another one that counters the countermeasures, and then, it goes on. And that's kind of the spiral we're in. So as time has gone on, we've developed, not just we, have developed improvements in the capabilities of MANPADS, and as well ways and means of thwarting the countermeasures. And that conundrum continues. I can't point to any specific technology that will be the ultimate silver bullet, so to speak, that would negate MANPADS. We'll never, I don't think, reach that point.
Pushing more into the theater, something that's on the table?
I'm sorry?
Pushing more of that technology into the theater, something that's on the table?
Well, certainly where we can, and in the West, as we develop new capabilities and counter capabilities, sure.
Jim McLaughlin.
It's a double-edged sword, though, because what you always worry about is whatever capability you develop, having it fall into the wrong hands. And again, the pervasive access to these systems is kind of a inhibitor towards their widespread distribution.
Jim McLaughlin from The Intercept.
Hi, thank you so much, Director, for being here. I want to return to something you said earlier about the Snowden revelations leading to a 7-year speed up in the development of end-to-end encryption. And with the technologists I've spoken with, they continually say that there's an arms race to develop this strong encryption to defeat hackers that are constantly trying to penetrate their systems. Could you expand a little bit on where that figure comes from, and also whether or not it's a good thing that we sort of encourage this sort of innovation?
I don't understand your last question.
What I'm saying is whether or not, it's a good thing that this innovation sped up, if it did.
Oh, well, not from our standpoint. No, it's not. I take that's an estimate that which I think was quite valid by NSA, that the projected growth, maturation, and instantiation of commercially available encryption. What they had forecast for 7 years from 3 years ago was accelerated to now because of the revelations, the leaks. And so from our standpoint, this is not a good thing.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Director Sean Lingus with FCW. It's been a few months since you set up CTIC, the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center. Wondering if you had any doubts personally about the ability of that organization to overcome bureaucratic hurdles, and if you can give a general update on the status of operation and what it's been doing.
Well, first of all, just to be clear, the President directed me to do this, to establish the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center. And because of all the controversy surrounding its stand-up, we had a lot of time to think through what its capabilities would be. It's only 50 people, bear in mind, and we haven't built to that yet. What it could do and what it couldn't do. And so we spent a good bit of time engaging with stakeholders, both others that have related missions, as well as users and consumers, to sort out exactly what the CTIC is doing. And the feedback that we're getting from that is pretty positive. Just like, the reason that my office was set up by the IRTPA was to promote integration. So just as the National Counterterrorism Center, the National Counterproliferation Center, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center promote integration across the IC in those realms, so is it with the CTIC for cyber.
Has the CTIC intelligence gleaned from the CTIC been used for offensive operations overseas?
I'm not going to go there.
We've got a couple minutes left. We're going to try and get in two more questions. Chuck Rosh and Patrick Tucker. Chuck.
Director, again, thank you for doing this again. It's been reported that you agree with Senator McCain in that any intelligence obtained from waterboarding is not worth the propaganda power that it gives the opponents. What about, does that same apply to in a presidential campaign context when you have a presidential candidate out saying that he would reinstitute waterboarding?
Well, actually, Senator McCain asked me to comment at Armed Services Committee threat hearing on the use of torture as a way of eliciting information. And first of all, the science tells you that it doesn't necessarily work, that whether you're interrogating for intelligence purposes or law enforcement purposes, the most important thing is to develop and build rapport with whoever it is that you're interrogating. And in a torture context, people generally, they'll get to the point where they'll tell you whatever it is you want to hear. So apart from that, the practicalities of the utility of information that's so derived is, I think we are much better served as a nation to conduct interrogation activities in a manner that comports with our standards and our values. And I strongly endorse what John Brennan said about the use of torture. It won't be through me.
Does it hurt when a presidential candidate, does it hurt intelligence, U.S. intelligence, when a presidential candidate raises the possibility of waterboarding?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Patrick Tucker from Defense One.
Thanks. The political stalemate in Libya is seen as a major obstacle to expanded U.S. operations there. Do you think that political stalemate is close to resolving?
Well, we're very hopeful about the latest version of the government in Libya, the government of national accord. Very, very fragile. It appears that there's room for some hope here. If and as it gains traction and gains credibility within the very fractious political landscape in Libya. And certainly we're much better off if we can operate with a government and cooperate with one, and certainly if we are going to do something militarily, that we have some recognized governmental entity that we can engage with and hopefully consent to such operations.
A quick follow-up to my earlier question. Was that nuclear bomb test from earlier this year, was that a test of a boosted bomb?
We don't really know. They claimed it was a hydrogen weapon. If it was, it fell way short of what you would regard as a hydrogen weapon or any other type of a boosted fission. It's hard to say what they were trying to do, but it was much more modest than they claimed.
We want to thank you for. You have a 2-minute question? Go for it.
Rudy Packel, Washington Examiner. There was a report on 60 Minutes last week with Representative Liu about a telecom network called SS7, and the claim is essentially made that any intelligence agency that can access that network can surveil any phone number that they can identify, which in effect allows them to surveil members of Congress. And Representative Liu is questioning whether the NSA knew about that, and if so, why members of Congress were never alerted to that law.
Well, I don't know the full history of this. I will tell you that we have very, very stringent rules on any inadvertent collection on the Congress, and that's the only time it occurs. And we have, in fact, we're now negotiating with the Congress on improving enhancing the manner in which we share that information. That's an old system, and of course, it was done on the 60 Minutes thing with the consent of users. So, I think that's about all I should say about it.
Thank you for doing this, sir. Appreciate it very much.